I looked at the turkey in the oven and thought that maybe this was a bad idea. 68 years of life had taught me a lot, but cooking holiday dinners was not on my list of talents. Margaret had always done it. 12 years had passed since she'd left, and I still occasionally turned around to ask her opinion on something insignificant. Today was Christmas Eve, and my little house on the outskirts of Grand Forks was preparing to host guests for the first time in a long time. Jasmine was to arrive with her husband Parker, my daughter and her chosen one. Just thinking about it made my insides chill. I checked the time, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. 2 more hours until they arrived. The turkey was roasting, the potatoes were peeled, and a jar of cranberry sauce was waiting to be made. I tried. Honestly, I tried hard. I even bought a tablecloth from the dollar store, a red one with ridiculous gold snowflakes on it. Jasmine would probably roll her eyes when she saw it, but it was Christmas, damn it. It had to be festive. I sat down in my shabby chair, the same one Jasmine called Dad's throne. It used to be an affectionate nickname. Now there was always a slight contempt in her voice, as if my attachment to old furniture was evidence of backwardness. Maybe it was. But when you've been on the railroad for 37 years, you learn to appreciate the things that don't fail. He remembered the first time he'd brought Jasmine home, a tiny bundle with a red, wrinkled face. Margaret was in the hospital with complications from childbirth, and I, a big man with calloused hands, was scared to death I'd do something wrong. But we got through it. And then, when Margaret left, we did too. On the mantelpiece was a picture of Jasmine in her high school graduation gown. She was smiling like the whole world lay at her feet. I remembered that day. I remembered how proud I was of her. The first in our family to go to university. Dad, you don't realize the opportunities that come with higher education, she told me then, eyes shining with dreams and ambition. I did. That's why I worked overtime, saved on everything to pay for her education. Sociology. Honestly, I didn't fully understand what that science was, but if Jasmine thought it was important, then it was. The phone rang, snapping me out of my reverie. Peter, did you remember I'm stopping by tomorrow? Alan, my old friend, sounded a little concerned. I hadn't forgotten, but Jasmine is coming with her husband today. Ah, there was so much understanding in that short sound that there was no need to explain. And how are you? Fine, I answered, even though we both knew I wasn't. Alan Clayton had known me longer than anyone else in this town. We'd met when I'd first started working for the railroad and he'd sorted mail at the station. 70 years old he was now, 35 years of friendship. He was there for me when Margaret died. He'd watched Jasmine grow up, and he was the only one I told how I felt after she married Parker Palmer. Why don't I stop by today, before they get here? Alan suggested it. I was grateful for his suggestion, but shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. It's not worth it. I can handle it. It's only dinner. Okay. I could hear the doubt in his voice. But if you need anything, call me. Anytime. After the conversation, I decided to go out on the porch. The air was frosty, the snow crunching under my feet. I had cleared the small yard in front of the house in the morning. The path to the house was sprinkled with salt. I didn't want anyone to slip, especially Jasmine in her heeled city shoes. The last time I saw my daughter was 3 months ago. She'd stopped by for 15 minutes to pick up some old paperwork. Parker was waiting in the car. The motor ran the entire time she was in the house, apparently to emphasize the temporariness of the visit. My daughter had changed. It wasn't the haircut or the clothes. It was something deeper. It was as if she was ashamed of her background, of me, this house, everything that reminded her of her life before Parker and the university. I looked at my hands, laborer's hands, calluses, scars from minor injuries, thickened joints from years of physical labor, not like Parker's hands, with their perfect manicures and expensive watches. I remembered the way he'd held out his hand to me the first time I met him, like he was doing me a favor, and how Jasmine had looked at both of us with concern, like she was afraid I'd say or do something inappropriate. It was strange how quickly things had changed. As recently as 4 years ago, before I met Parker, Jasmine came home every weekend. We cooked together. We'd watch old movies. She'd tell me about her lectures, and I'd tell her stories from work. Simple joys. I thought we had a special bond. Went back to the house, checked on the turkey. A 15-minute walk in the cold cleared my head. Needed to put the past in the past. It's Christmas today. I'll see my daughter. That's all that matters. I pulled a gift for Jasmine out of the closet, a scarf that Carol, the librarian and longtime acquaintance of mine, had helped me pick out. Expensive, but not garish, was how she described it. I hoped Jasmine would like it. For Parker, I bought a car care kit. I didn't know if he'd appreciate it. Their wedding gift from me, a check for $10,000 he accepted without a word of thanks. There was a knock on the door. Too early for Jasmine and Parker. I opened it and saw Carol Sutton wrapped in a coat and scarf. "Thought I'd stop by before they arrived," she said, handing me a container. Apple pie. Just out of the oven. Carol is a widow, like me. Her husband died 5 years ago. We weren't dating, in case anyone was thinking. Just two lonely people who occasionally kept each other company. "Thank you," I accepted the pie. "Do you want to come in?" She shook her head. "I won't interrupt the family dinner. Just wanted to make sure you were okay." Why does everyone think I'm not okay? I tried to sound annoyed, but it came out more tired. "Because we know you, Peter," she smiled. "And we love you, despite your stubbornness." Carol looked at me carefully. "Are you ready for this meeting, Peter? The last time you talked about Parker, you were upset." I shrugged. "What can I do? She chose him. I have to respect her choice." "Respect it, yes. But that doesn't mean you have to disrespect yourself." Carol put her hand on my shoulder. "Remember that." After she left, I finished the arrangements. The table was set, the turkey was almost done, and the potatoes were in the oven. I pulled out the old Christmas napkins that Margaret loves so much, with reindeer and sleighs. Jasmine would probably find them old-fashioned. I looked around the room. A small Christmas tree in the corner, decorated with toys Margaret and I had collected over the years. Old furniture, shabby but clean. Pictures on the walls, the history of our family. This was my home. Not rich, not fancy, but mine. And it had once been Jasmine's and mine. I remembered 20 years ago when 5-year-old Jasmine and I decorated the Christmas tree. How she laughed when I lifted it up so she could hang a star from the top. How we baked cookies with Margaret and the flour was everywhere, even on the ceiling. And now it's all changed. Jasmine's grown up, a different person, a person who seemed ashamed of her own father. "Stop it," I said out loud to myself. "Don't get yourself worked up. Maybe I was exaggerating. Maybe tonight would go well. Maybe Parker would finally see me as a human being and not just an inconvenient appendage to his wife." I looked in the oven again. The turkey looked decent. I'd never been a good cook, but I tried extra hard today. I went over the recipe 10 times, watched the temperature, added all the spices that were recommended. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock in the evening. I wiped my hands on a towel and headed out to open it. It was already dark outside the window, and the dim light from the streetlights reflected in the freshly fallen snow. Taking a deep breath, I swung the door open. Jasmine stood on the doorstep in an elegant beige coat with elaborate hair and makeup that I thought was a little too bright for a family dinner. Beside her, just behind her, loomed the tall figure of Parker in an expensive dark blue coat. "Daddy!" Jasmine stepped forward and hugged me. The hug was quick and formal, as if she were performing an obligatory ritual. "Merry Christmas, darling," I kissed her cheek, trying not to mess up her makeup. "It's good to see you." "Mr. Coleman," Parker held out his hand for a handshake. His palm was warm and dry, the handshake firm and short. "Thank you for the invitation." "Just Peter, please," I reminded him for the umpteenth time. "Come in, it's freezing outside." They entered the house and I helped Jasmine take off her coat. I noticed at once that she was wearing a new dress, dark red, obviously expensive. Parker was wearing a suit with a burgundy tie. "Something smells good," Jasmine said, sniffing. "Did you cook it yourself?" "Yes, turkey with cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, and apple pie for dessert. Carol made the pie, though." "Carol?" Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "That librarian? You two are still friends?" "Yeah, we see each other from time to time," I answered, trying to ignore her tone. Parker looked around the living room with ill-concealed disdain. His gaze slid over the old photographs on the walls, the worn carpet, the small Christmas tree with vintage toys. "It's a cozy place," he said, in a tone that made it clear he wasn't comfortable here at all. "It's very nostalgic." "Thank you," I said. "I've lived here for 30 years. Lots of memories." "Yeah, lots of memories." Jasmine looked around the room. "Nothing's changed since I left. Even the arrangement of the furniture is the same." "Why change what works?" I smiled, pointing to the couch. "Have a seat. The turkey is almost ready." They sat down next to each other on the couch, and I went to the kitchen to check the oven. I returned a couple minutes later with a tray containing 3 glasses and a bottle of wine. "I hope you don't mind the red wine?" "It's not anything special, but the salesman at the store said it wasn't bad." Parker took the bottle, studied the label, and faintly wrinkled his nose. "Sure it'll do," he said, handing the bottle back. Although Jasmine and I usually prefer the more aged varieties. I opened the wine and filled the glasses. Jasmine took a small sip and nodded. "Not bad, Dad, for its price range." Something in that phrase stung, but I swallowed the offense and changed the subject. "How was your trip? Were the roads not too snowy?" "It was fine," Parker replied. "We have a new 4-wheel drive BMW, so snow is not a problem." "The traffic downtown was terrible, though," Jasmine added. "All those Christmas sales." "Yeah, it's always like that in Grand Forks before the holidays." I nodded. "I remember when your mom and I would always leave our shopping for the last minute and then wait in line for hours." Jasmine tensed slightly at the mention of Margaret. She rarely talked about her mother. Sometimes I thought she blamed me for her death, even though she rationally realized that was absurd. "How are your studies going?" I asked to lighten the atmosphere. "The defense of the diploma is soon, right?" "In May." Jasmine nodded. "I'm writing a paper on the influence of social networks on the identity of the modern generation. My supervisor thinks I have a chance of getting a grant to continue my research." "That sounds impressive," I said sincerely. "I always knew you would succeed." "Jasmine is the best in the class," Parker said proudly, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Professor Jenkins says she has a bright future in academia." "That's great," I smiled. "I've always believed in you, sweetheart." The ringing of the timer from the kitchen interrupted our conversation. "The turkey's ready," I announced, rising. "Shall we move to the table?" They followed me into the small dining room where I had already set the table with a festive tablecloth and arranged the best dishes, the ones that were usually kept in the sideboard and used only on special occasions. In the center of the table was a candle in an old candlestick that had once belonged to Margaret's mother. "Wow," Jasmine looked around the table. "You did a good job, Daddy." "It's Christmas," I shrugged, "and it's been a long time since we've gotten together." I went to the kitchen and came back with a turkey on a big platter. Then I brought out mashed potatoes, vegetables, and gravy. "It looks delicious," Parker said, though there was a note of surprise in his voice, as if he hadn't expected me to be able to make anything edible. We sat down at the table and I cut up the turkey, trying to do it carefully. My hands were shaking a little with excitement. "Let me help you." Parker held out his hand for the knife. "I have experience carving poultry." I reluctantly handed him the knife, and he proceeded to cut the turkey with confident, honed movements. Parker learned it from his father, Jasmine explained. Their family always emphasized such skills. My father thought a man should know how to handle a knife, Parker said as he sliced neatly. He was a chef at Azure, which is a restaurant in Boston. Sounds impressive, I nodded, feeling awkward. My culinary skills were limited to the simple dishes I'd learned to make to feed Jasmine after Margaret died. Parker finished slicing the meat and handed the knife back to me. We filled our plates and I raised my glass. To Christmas, and to our family. To Christmas, they echoed, and we drank. The first few minutes of dinner passed in relative silence, broken only by the clinking of cutlery and polite requests for salt or sauce. Parker tasted each dish cautiously as if he feared poisoning. "It's really good, Peter," he said at last, and I felt a misplaced joy at his approval. Surprisingly good, considering the circumstances. "What circumstances?" I asked, not quite understanding. "Well, you know." He made a vague gesture with his hand. "Small kitchen, limited budget. You made the most of what you had." I felt something cold slide down my spine, but I held back. "Thank you," I replied dryly. "Daddy always knew how to get out of things," Jasmine added with a smile that I didn't think reached her eyes. "Remember when you fixed our old refrigerator with duct tape and wire? It worked for another 3 years. "Yes," I smiled at the memory. "We didn't have the money for a new one, and the technician charged a crazy amount for the repair. Now we just order new equipment online when something breaks," Parker said. "Life's too short to mess around with fixing old stuff." I nodded silently, noting the we. Jasmine and Parker had only been married 8 months, but they were already a unit, the we, in everything. I was glad my daughter was happy, but something about this union made me feel uneasy. Dinner continued in the same vein. Every comment I made was met with a condescending smile or a hidden sneer. Every aspect of my life seemed to be criticized. My house was too small and outdated. My job at the railroad was too simple. My friends were too ordinary. By dessert, I felt completely drained. When I brought Carol's pie, Parker didn't even try to hide his contempt. "Home baking?" He grinned. "We usually order desserts from Le Petit Chef downtown. They have amazing eclairs." Jasmine, apparently wanting to lighten the atmosphere, asked, "Daddy, what's new with you? How's your health? How are your friends?" "I'm fine," I replied. "My blood pressure is a little high sometimes, but nothing serious. Alan's been sick for a while, but he's getting better." "And what about Carol?" Jasmine asked with a slight hint in her voice. "Are you two still friends?" "Yes, we see each other. We go to the movies sometimes, to cafes." "So, you're in a relationship?" Parker asked me bluntly. "We're friends," I answered firmly. "Good friends." "Dad, you're 68, Jasmine rolled her eyes. "You don't have to be embarrassed by the word relationship." "I'm not shy," I countered. "I'm just calling things by their proper names. Carol and I are friends." "If you say so," Parker grinned, glancing over at Jasmine. The tension was building by the minute. After dessert, Parker looked at his watch. "We have to leave soon. We still have a party at the Johnsons'." "That early?" I couldn't hide my disappointment. "We haven't even had a chance to talk." "It's the Christmas season, you know," Jasmine shrugged. "So many events." "By the way, Daddy," she added casually, "you paid for my last semester, didn't you?" "Yes, as usual," I answered, feeling slightly annoyed at how quickly the conversation had turned to money. "Great," she smiled, relieved. "Just checking in." When we got back to the living room, Parker noticed a picture of Jasmine in her prom dress on the mantelpiece. "God, that hair," he laughed. "You look like a hick." To my surprise, Jasmine laughed too. "It's awful, isn't it? I had no idea about style back then." "You were beautiful," I countered. "You still are." "Oh, Daddy," Jasmine waved me away. "You have to say that. You're my father." But honestly, I looked like a redneck back then. Like this whole town, Parker added, looking around. Honestly, I don't know how you grew up here and didn't go crazy with boredom. Grand Forks is a good town. I felt anger rising inside. Decent people live here. Sure, sure, Parker smiled indulgently. It's just a little primitive, especially after Boston. Parker grew up in the suburbs of Boston, Jasmine explained, as if that explained his arrogance. His father was a famous chef and his mother was a literature professor. Very impressive, I said, not hiding my sarcasm. And my father was a truck driver and my mother worked in a factory. I guess that explains my primitive. Dad, Jasmine's voice took on a warning tone. No one said you were primitive. Did they? I looked at her, point blank. What about all those comments about my house, my life, my town? We're just joking around. Jasmine looked annoyed. You always take everything too seriously. That's right, Parker picked up on it. You can't be so sensitive. It's just friendly banter. Friendly? I shook my head. Friends don't make each other feel inferior. Inferior? Jasmine looked genuinely surprised. Dad, you're exaggerating. No one thinks you're inferior. Really? I looked at Parker. Then what did you mean when you said I was stuck in the past? Or when you made fun of my house? It was just a statement of fact, Parker shrugged. You really are stuck. There's no shame in that. It's just reality. Reality? I could feel the anger building. Is your reality, then, better? Objectively, yes, Parker said firmly. We have successful careers, prospects, modern lifestyles. That's not a value judgment, it's just a fact. I looked at Jasmine, expecting her to say something in my defense, but she remained silent, looking down at the floor. And you agree with that? I asked quietly. Jasmine looked up and I saw a strange mixture of pity and embarrassment in her eyes. Dad, you're a wonderful man and you've been a wonderful father. But yes, I agree that you're stuck. You're living in the past. Honestly, sometimes I'm ashamed of it. Ashamed? I felt something torn inside. What exactly are you ashamed of, Jasmine? All of it, she said with her hand around the room. Your lifestyle. For refusing to move forward. For being so provincial. Sometimes. Sometimes I'm ashamed to tell my friends that my father is a small-town railroad worker. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I felt the blood rush from my face. I understand, I said quietly, rising from the table. I understand now. Daddy, wait, Jasmine looked worried. I didn't mean that. No, that's exactly what I meant, I shook my head. You're ashamed of me, ashamed of everything I've done for you, everything I've sacrificed. Peter, Parker interjected, you're being dramatic. Jasmine just wanted to say, I know what she meant to say, I interrupted him. And I know what you both really think of me. I turned and walked silently out of the room, leaving them sitting at the table with puzzled expressions on their faces. The door closed behind Jasmine and Parker around 8 o'clock that evening. Their departure was hasty and awkward, short apologies that sounded insincere, strained hugs, and promises to call that no one believed. I stood on the porch, watching their expensive car pull out of the driveway, and felt a strange emptiness inside. The snow fell silently, settling on my shoulders and hair, but I was in no hurry to get back inside. When the lights of their car finally disappeared into the darkness, I slowly walked inside. The house greeted me with silence and the smell of uneaten dinner. There were still plates of leftovers on the table, glasses of unfinished wine, and festive napkins that now seemed ridiculous. Christmas was ruined. I began mechanically clearing the table, putting the dishes in the sink, throwing away the leftovers, wrapping the leftover turkey in foil. The movements were automatic, the thoughts far removed from these simple actions. Jasmine's face came before my eyes again and again as she said these words. Sometimes I'm ashamed to tell my friends that my father is a former railroad worker from a small town. Ashamed. My daughter was ashamed of me, the man who raised her alone after Margaret died, who worked overtime to make sure she had everything she needed, who denied himself everything, saving for her education, who always put her interests before his own. Finished cleaning up, I sank into my old chair and stared at the Christmas tree. Little lights flickered in the darkness, reflecting in the glass balls. Margaret and I had bought this garland on our first Christmas together. "It will bring us luck," Margaret said then. And indeed, the garland has survived many things: moves, financial difficulties, Jasmine's birth, Margaret's death. It has always been lit, giving a faint but constant light in the darkness. Now Jasmine thought it was old-fashioned, and so did I. The clock showed almost 10 p.m., but I didn't feel tired. Instead, a strange, almost forgotten feeling was building up inside. Anger. Not explosive, furious anger, but cold, heavy, slowly spreading like ice on a river. Anger at Parker with his condescending smiles and dismissive comments. Anger at Jasmine, who had betrayed everything I had taught her for the sake of accepting her arrogant husband into the world. And most unpleasantly, anger at myself for letting it happen. I turned on the TV, hoping to distract myself, but I couldn't focus on the flickering pictures. I turned it off and tried to read a book, but the words blurred before my eyes. Eventually, I just sat in the dark, watching the snow fall outside the window and replayed the events of the evening in my head. Around midnight, I went up to the second floor and went into Jasmine's room. It was almost exactly the same as it had been when her daughter left for university 6 years ago. Bookshelves filled with old textbooks and novels, posters of music bands she loved as a teenager, pictures of friends from high school she hadn't talked to in a long time. This whole room was a monument to the Jasmine I knew and loved. The girl who admired me, was proud of me, thought I was a hero. That girl is gone. In her place was a young woman who looked at me with pity and shame, who considered my life a failure and me a loser. I sat on the edge of her bed and picked up an old teddy bear that Margaret had bought before Jasmine was born. Mr. Beans was what her daughter called him when she learned to talk. She slept with him until she was 15, and then claimed she was too old for such childish things. But she couldn't bear to part with it and left it in her room. I wonder if she's ashamed of that tattered bear now. She probably is. I went back to my room, but sleep would not come. I lay with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how everything had gone wrong. When did Jasmine start to change? When did this arrogance, this condescension come into play? When did she decide I wasn't good enough for her new world? Maybe it started at university, among new friends from wealthy families. Or maybe with the arrival of Parker, with his constant talk of status and success. Or maybe those seeds had always been there. I just didn't want to notice them. Either way, the result was obvious. My daughter had turned into a person I didn't recognize. A person who measured other people's worth by their bank account and social standing. A man who was ashamed of his own father for a lifetime of honest labor. Around 3 in the morning, I got out of bed, realizing I wasn't going to sleep. I went down to the kitchen, brewed a strong cup of coffee, and sat down at the table, opening a folder with financial documents. Here were all of Jasmine's tuition receipts for the past 6 years. Amounts that were huge to me, but which I paid without hesitation, considering my daughter's education a top priority. The last payment I'd made a week ago was $6,500 for the spring semester. That was almost all of my savings. I planned to live frugally until my next retirement, as I did every semester. Never complained, never asked Jasmine for help, just paid because I wanted her to have a better future than me. And that's how she thanked me, with shame and contempt. At that moment, something clicked inside me. The decision that had been forming subconsciously all evening suddenly became crystal clear. I will no longer pay. I will not support a man who has no respect for me or my values. I will not fund an education that seems to only alienate my daughter from everything I was trying to teach her. It was too early to call the university, so I drafted a letter to the administrative office explaining that I wanted to cancel my last payment. I knew it was possible. There was a refund clause in the contract for canceling within 10 days of payment. I was just about to meet that deadline. As I finished the letter, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in years, I'd made a decision with only myself in mind, not Jasmine. It was a liberating feeling. I spent the rest of the night sitting in my chair and watching the darkness outside my window gradually change to a gray Christmas morning. The snow was still falling, covering the world with a white blanket, erasing all imperfections. At 7 o'clock in the morning, the doorbell rang. It was Alan, as promised the day before. I had completely forgotten about his visit. When I opened the door, I saw an old friend with a package in his hands and a wide smile on his face. "Merry Christmas, Pete." He hugged me and patted me on the back. "You look terrible. Been up all night?" "Come on in." I led him inside. "You want coffee?" "Sure." Alan walked into the kitchen and set the bag on the table. "I brought muffins from Martha. She sends her congratulations." Martha was Alan's wife, a kind and caring woman who always treated me like family. "How was dinner?" Alan asked, taking a cup of coffee. I sighed. "Not great." "I thought so." Alan nodded. "I could tell by the way you sounded that you weren't expecting anything good." "It was even worse than I expected." I sat down across from him. "Jasmine, she's changed, Alan. Very different." "Tell me." He looked at me carefully, and I did. About the condescending smiles and dismissive comments, the way Parker judged my house, my life, my job, about how Jasmine didn't stand up for me but joined him, her confession that she was ashamed of me. "Damn it." Alan shook his head when I was done. I knew the guy was a snob, but I didn't think it was that bad. "It's not just him," I said. "Jasmine. She's the same now. Maybe she's always been like this, I just didn't notice." "Don't be ridiculous," Alan objected. "I've known Jasmine since she was a little girl. She was a good girl. It was the university and that Parker guy that changed her." "Maybe," I shrugged. "But the fact remains that she's ashamed of me, ashamed of who I was and who I am." "What are you going to do?" Alan asked. "I've already decided," I answered. "I'm going to cancel her last semester's tuition." Alan whistled. "That's a big step." "I know," I nodded, "but I can't do it anymore. I can't keep giving all my money to a person who has no respect for me or how that money was earned." "She'll be furious," Alan warned. "Let her." I felt my voice harden. "Maybe it'll make her think." "And you're sure it's not just an emotional reaction?" Alan asked cautiously. "Maybe you should sleep on that thought for another night." "I stayed up all night thinking about it," I answered. "And my decision won't change. Enough is enough. I've sacrificed everything for her for years, and she doesn't even appreciate it." Alan studied me for a few seconds, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll support you whatever you decide, but be prepared for the consequences." "I'm ready," I said, and for the first time in a long time I felt confident in my words. After Alan left, I called the university's administrative office. It was Christmas, but the hotline had operators on duty. The young man on the other end of the line listened patiently to my request and explained the procedure for canceling a payment. "You will need to fill out a form and send it by email," he said, "or you can come in person after the holidays." "I will send it today," I replied. "Can you tell me when the money will be back in my account?" "Usually the process takes 3 to 5 business days," the operator explained. "But because of the holidays, it can take up to 2 weeks." "I see. Thank you." I wrote down his instructions. "And the student? When will the student find out the payment has been canceled?" "The notification will be sent to the email registered in the system," said the operator. usually within 24 hours after your request has been processed. After the call, I filled out the form, attached a copy of the payment receipt, and mailed everything to the address provided. Then I leaned back in my chair, feeling a strange mixture of emotions: relief, anxiety, determination, and, yes, even some sadness. I had just taken a step that would probably change my relationship with my daughter forever, but I could no longer go on as before. The phone rang around noon. It was Carol. "Merry Christmas, Peter." Her voice sounded warm. "How was your evening?" "Not great," I answered honestly. "Can we get together? I need someone to talk to." "Sure," she said without hesitation. "I'm free right now. Come to my place or meet me at the cafe by the park." "Let's go to the cafe," I suggested. "I need some air." 40 minutes later, I was already sitting across from Carol in a cozy little cafe. In spite of Christmas, there were a few people here: singles, couples, families who had come for a hot chocolate after a walk in the snowy park. Carol listened attentively to my account of last night without interrupting. Her face was sympathetic but not pitying, and I was grateful for that. When I finished, she squeezed my hand in silence. "I'm sorry, Peter," she said at last. "It must be very painful." "Yes," I admitted. "But you know what the weirdest thing is? I feel not only pain, but also liberation. Like I've finally seen the truth I've been ignoring for so long." "What truth?" Carol asked. "That Jasmine had grown up a long time ago," I answered. "That she was no longer the girl I knew and loved. That our paths have diverged, and maybe that's okay." "It's not an easy realization," Carol nodded, "especially for a parent." "I canceled the payment for her last semester," I said, watching Carol's reaction. She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "That's a big step." "Do you think I'm doing it wrong?" Carol thought for a moment. "I think you have the right to stop sacrificing yourself for someone who doesn't appreciate it, even if that person is your daughter." "That's exactly what I think," I nodded. "I'm tired of being an ATM, tired of my value to her being measured only by the money I can give her." "But you realize she'll be furious, don't you?" Carol warned. "And Parker, too. Let her." I felt my voice harden. "Maybe it'll make her think about what's really important." "Maybe it won't," Carol said softly. "You have to be prepared for the fact that she won't apologize, won't change, won't come to you with remorse." "I know," I nodded, "and I'm ready for that. If our relationship has been based solely on my financial support, then there's no real relationship." Carol squeezed my hand tighter. "You're a strong man, Peter. You always have been, and I'll support you no matter what happens." "Thank you." I felt a lump come up in my throat. It meant a lot to me. We sat in the cafe for another hour talking about all sorts of things: books, city news, plans for next year. Carol didn't try to convince me to change my mind, didn't lecture me about family values, didn't offer compromises. She was just there for me, and that was enough. As we said goodbye at her house, Carol hugged me tighter than usual. "Call me when it all comes crashing down, any time of the day or night." "I promise," I smiled at her, "and thanks for understanding." "You're welcome," she looked at me seriously. "You know, Peter, sometimes the most loving thing to do is to let people face the consequences of their own actions, even if those people are our children." I nodded, realizing the deep wisdom in her words. Back at home, I checked my email. The university had already acknowledged receipt of my request to cancel the payment and promised to process it within 2 business days. That meant that Jasmine would probably receive the notice in a day or two. In a strange way, I felt calm. I had done what I had to do. For the first time in years, I had put myself and my self-respect above Jasmine's wishes. It was a strange, unfamiliar feeling, but it felt right. I sat back in my chair and looked at the picture of Jasmine on the mantelpiece. She was smiling so genuinely, so openly. That smile reminded me of the times when she looked at me with love and admiration instead of pity and shame. Maybe that girl is still out there somewhere, inside that haughty young woman I saw yesterday. Maybe she'll remember what I've tried to teach her all these years, that a person's real worth is not in their bank account or their social status, but in their actions, their principles, their ability to love and care for others. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe Jasmine is already too deep into Parker's world, a world where people like me are considered losers. Maybe we'll never be close again. The thought hurt, but I accepted it. No longer would I cling to illusions. I won't pretend everything is okay when it isn't. I won't sacrifice my dignity for the appearance of a relationship. My kindness and willingness to help turned into weakness in Jasmine's eyes. She took them for granted as something to be enjoyed without gratitude. That had to change, and now it had. I turned out the light and went to bed, feeling for the first time in a long time that I had made the right decision. Jasmine needed to realize that actions have consequences, that respect is a two-way street, and that even the most loving parent has their limits. It was 3 days after Christmas when the first bell rang. I was just finishing up a late breakfast, looking through the morning paper, when the phone exploded with a sharp sound. Jasmine's name popped up on the screen. I took a deep breath, put the paper aside, and picked up the phone. "Hello? Daddy, what the hell is going on?" Her voice was ringing with rage. No greeting, no "how are you?" just anger. "Hello, Jasmine," I answered calmly. "I assume you got your notice from the university?" "Hell yes, I got the notice," she practically screamed. "I got a letter that my semester fees have been canceled. What does that mean? Is there some kind of mistake?" "No, it's not a mistake." I tried to stay calm, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. "I canceled the payment." There was silence on the other end of the line, a silence so deep I wondered if the connection had been cut. "You... what?" Jasmine finally said, and her voice sounded like she couldn't believe her ears. "I canceled the payment for your last semester," I repeated. "After our Christmas dinner, I decided that I would no longer pay your tuition." But why?" Now her voice sounded not only indignant but also confused. "You really don't understand?" I asked. "After everything that was said at dinner?" "Daddy," her voice was more restrained, but it was still angry. "If you're offended by some joke, it's ridiculous. Grown men don't do that." "It wasn't a joke, Jasmine," I said firmly. "You and Parker had made it clear that you thought I was a loser, that you're ashamed of me, of my job, my house, everything I am." "God, Dad, you've got it all wrong," she exclaimed. "We were just teasing. It was just a normal conversation." "No, Jasmine," I shook my head, though she couldn't see it. "I got it right, and I've made a decision. I will no longer fund a man who has no respect for me and how that money was earned." "Disrespect?" Her voice got higher. "Dad, I've always respected you. How can you say that?" "Sometimes I'm ashamed to tell my friends that my father is a former railroad worker from a small town," I quoted her own words. "Those are your words, Jasmine, not mine." There was silence again. I could hear her heavy breathing. "Yeah, I didn't mean it," she finally said, her voice shaky. "I was upset. We were both on edge." "No, Jasmine," I interrupted. "When we're angry, we say what we really think, and you told the truth. You're ashamed of me. And you know what? I'm ashamed too. Ashamed of what you've become." "How dare you!" Now she was screaming again. "After all I've done to make you proud of me. Great grades, getting into a prestigious university, doing research." "I've always been proud of you," I said, "but not the person you've become. Not the person who looks down on others just because they don't have a university education or an expensive car. You can't just cancel the payment." There was desperation in her voice. "The semester starts in 2 weeks. What am I supposed to do now?" "It's not my problem anymore," I replied, feeling a strange firmness in my voice. "You're a grown woman, Jasmine. You have a husband with a good job. Work it out on your own. You, you can't do this to me, she spoke quietly, threateningly now. You're gonna regret this, Daddy. I swear you'll regret it. Maybe, I agreed, but no more than I already regret that my daughter grew up ashamed of her father. She hung up the phone. I sat staring at the silenced phone and felt a strange mix of emotions, sadness, disappointment, but also a strange relief. I had finally said what I was thinking. No more pretending. The phone rang again 10 minutes later. This time it was Parker. Peter, he spoke in a low-key, businesslike tone. We need to discuss the situation like reasonable people. Hello, Parker, I answered. I'm listening. Jasmine is very upset, he began, and I can understand why you took offense at Christmas dinner. Perhaps we were a little tactless. Insensitive? I chuckled. Interesting choice of words. Look, he sounded impatient. We all say things we regret sometimes, but canceling Jasmine's tuition is too drastic a step. You're jeopardizing her future. Her future is up to her, I replied, and on you, as her husband, not on me. Be realistic, Peter, he sounded annoyed now. You know how much tuition costs. $6,500 is a huge amount of money. Yes, I know, I replied calmly. I've paid that amount every semester for the last 6 years, $65,000 in total, out of my modest pension. Parker was silent for a moment. Well, I see your point, he said at last, and his voice became softer, almost ingratiating. And Jasmine and I are truly sorry if our words have hurt you, but please think about the consequences. Jasmine is one step away from earning her degree. This is her last semester. I know, I said, and that's why I'm sure you'll find a way to pay for it. You've been talking about your promotion, about the new house you're going to buy. I'm sure $6,500 isn't that much for you. There was a pause. I could almost hear the gears in Parker's head working, trying to find a way out. It's not about the money, he finally said, though we both knew it was a lie. It's about principle. You started paying for her education, and to suddenly give that up at the last minute is unfair. Life isn't fair at all, Parker, I replied. I thought that was a basic principle in your corporate world. Don't do it, Peter. His voice was now threatening. You're destroying your relationship with your daughter. Are you really willing to lose her because of your pride? Are you really willing to give up $6,000 for your wife's future? I parried. He was silent for a long time. Then he sighed. I'll tell her you're not going to change your mind. Tell her, I agreed, and also tell her that my door is always open to her, but only if she comes as a daughter, not as an ATM customer. He hung up without a goodbye. The next few days passed in silence. Neither Jasmine nor Parker called. I went about my daily business reading, walking around the snowy city, seeing Alan and Carol. But my thoughts kept returning to Jasmine. How was she doing? Had they found the money? How does she feel about me now? On the 4th day after our conversation, the doorbell rang. It was about 6 in the evening, and it was already dark outside the window. I opened the door and saw Jasmine standing on the doorstep. She looked exhausted, pale with circles under her eyes, wearing plain clothes instead of her usual stylish outfits. Daddy, she said quietly, can I come in? I stepped back silently, letting her into the house. She walked into the living room and sat down on the couch, clutching her hands nervously. Would you like some tea? I asked. Yes, please. Her voice sounded hoarse, as if she had been crying a lot. I went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and got the cups. I tried to move slowly, giving myself time to gather my thoughts. When I returned with the tray, Jasmine was sitting still, staring at one point. Here, I set the cup in front of her. Lemon, just the way you like it. Thank you. She took the cup but didn't drink it, just held it in her hands, warming her fingers. Daddy, I came to apologize. I sat down across from her and waited for her to continue. What I said at Christmas. It was awful. She looked up at me, her eyes full of tears. I don't know what came over me. I'm not ashamed of you, I swear. I've never been ashamed of you. But that's what you said, I reminded her gently. I know, she lowered her gaze. And I have no excuse. I don't know. Maybe I was trying to impress Parker. Or maybe I was annoyed about something else? I don't know, Dad, but that's not how I really feel. I stared at her, trying to see if she was sincere. Part of me wanted to just hug her, tell her it was okay, that I understood. But the other part remembered not only her words, but the look on her face when she said them. There was no doubt there, only contempt. Jasmine, I finally said, I appreciate you coming to apologize. But I'm not sure I can just forget what happened. Not just what you said, but the whole night. The way you and Parker held yourselves, the way you talked to me. I know, she nodded, a tear rolling down her cheek. It was awful. We were awful. And I deserve your anger. But Daddy? She looked at me pleadingly. I can't lose my spot in the program. This is my last semester. All these years of studying will be for nothing if I don't finish now. Oh, so that's it. It wasn't the apology that brought her here. It was the money. Parker can't help? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Jasmine shook her head. We're having financial difficulties right now. We put a down payment on a house in River Heights. All of our savings went into it. I see, I nodded. So the house is more important than your education. No, she raised her head. It's hard to explain. The house was an opportunity not to be missed. We planned that you'd pay for the last semester like you always do, and then I'd get a job and start paying you back. You planned, I repeated, without asking me, just taking it for granted that I would keep paying. I know that sounds awful. She looked at me with desperation. And I understand why you're angry. But Dad, please, I'll make it up to you, I swear. I'll come every weekend. I'll help you with the house. Anything to help me finish my degree. I looked at my daughter and I saw the girl I raised, the girl I loved most in the world. But I also saw a grown woman who only comes to me when she needs something, who only apologizes because she's in dire straits. I can't, Jasmine, I said quietly. Not this time. What? She looked shocked, as if she'd believed I'd give in. I can't keep doing this, I explained. I can't just be a source of money for you. I can't pretend everything's okay when it's not. But I apologized. There was resentment in her voice now. What more do you want from me? I want you to understand, I said. I want you to understand what it means to respect people no matter how wealthy or educated they are. I want you to understand gratitude. I want you to understand that relationships are not a one-way street. And you think destroying my education is going to help me understand that? Now she sounded almost hysterical. Is that your pedagogical method? No, I shook my head. I just won't do anything that hurts me anymore. And continuing to fund a man who doesn't respect me is hurting me. I respect you. She raised her voice. How many times do I have to say it? It's not the words, Jasmine, I said quietly. It's about actions, and your actions say otherwise. She stood up, her face contorted with anger and frustration. Okay, I get it. You've decided to punish me for one mistake, one bad night, to undo everything that had happened between us. No, I stood up too. This isn't punishment. It's a consequence. And they don't undo everything that's happened between us. I'm still your father. I still love you. But I won't be your ATM anymore. Fine, she headed for the exit. I'll be fine on my own, somehow, without your help. I'm sure you will, I said after her. You're strong. You always have been. She stopped at the door without turning around. You know what the most hurtful thing is? I really did come to apologize. It wasn't just about the money. I really missed you these days. With those words, she walked out, slamming the door loudly. I stood in the silence of the empty house, feeling heavy in my chest. Was she sincere at the end, or was it another manipulation? I didn't know, and I may never know. Jasmine didn't call or visit for the next week. I tried to go about my daily business, but my thoughts kept coming back to her. How was she coping? Had she found a way out of the situation? The answer came unexpectedly. Wednesday night, the phone rang. It was Carol. "Peter," she said without preamble, "did you know that Jasmine got a job at the post office?" "What?" I was stunned. "No, I didn't. How did you know?" "My niece works there," Carol explained. "She said Jasmine came in yesterday. They hired her part-time so she could work around her studies." "So she found a way to pay for the semester," I muttered, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. "I guess so," Carol agreed. "But Peter," Susan said that Jasmine looked exhausted, and she told me that she and her husband were having problems, that he was furious that she had to take a job like that. I sighed. Somehow I wasn't surprised. Parker, with his snobbery and notions of status, probably thought working in the post office was something demeaning, just like he looked at my job at the railroad. "Thanks for telling me," I thanked Carol. "But I won't get involved. Jasmine has made her choice, and she has to live with the consequences." "I understand," Carol said softly. "I just thought you should know." After talking to Carol, I sat in my chair for a long time, staring out the window at the snow-covered yard. Part of me wanted to call Jasmine, to ask how she was, to offer to help. But the other part knew that would be a step backward. If I gave in now, nothing would change. She would never realize that her words and actions have consequences. 2 days later, I met Alan at a coffee shop. He'd heard the news too. In a small town like Grand Forks, rumors travel fast. "They say she works in the mornings before lectures," Alan said, stirring his coffee. "And weekends too." "Tough schedule," I said. "Yeah." Alan looked at me, studying me. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," I answered, though it wasn't quite true. Every time I thought about Jasmine, working at the post office, trying to combine that with her studies, my heart clenched. But I also knew that it was her choice, and maybe this experience would teach her what I couldn't teach her with words. "Susan says Parker never once comes to pick her up after his shift," Alan continued. "He always takes the bus." "No wonder," I muttered. "He's probably afraid one of his co-workers will see him at the post office." "Right," Alan shook his head. "You know, Pete, I never told you this, but I always thought that guy was no match for your Jasmine. Too much empty gloss, too little substance." I didn't answer. What could I say? That I saw it too, but closed my eyes because Jasmine seemed happy. That I was afraid to interfere with her choices, even as I saw her change around him. It was too late for such confessions. After a few more days, I received a call from Martha, Alan's wife. She rarely called me directly, usually communicating through Alan, so I was surprised. "Peter," she said without preamble, "I just came from the mall. I saw Jasmine and her friend there. They were sitting in a cafe, and Jasmine was crying. What happened?" I felt my heart squeeze. "I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose," Martha said quickly. "I was just passing by. But I heard her saying something about Parker, that he's always reproaching her with this job, that he said she was embarrassing him with her degradation to the level of a postal clerk." I clenched my fists. This was it. Parker showed his true colors when it came to real hardship, when his wife had to work in a position he deemed unworthy. "Thank you for telling me, Martha," I thanked him, "but I can't interfere. It's her life, her choice." "I understand," Martha said softly. "I just thought you should know." I couldn't sleep for a long time after that call. I tossed and turned in bed, thinking about Jasmine, about her tears, about the way Parker was treating her. Part of me wanted to rush to her aid, to protect her from that arrogant jerk. But the other part of me knew that she had to figure this situation out for herself. figure out who Parker really was. The next blow came from out of nowhere. Friday night there was a knock on my door. I opened it and saw Susan, Carol's niece, the same one who worked at the post office with Jasmine. "Mr. Coleman," she said, fidgeting with the strap of her bag. "I'm sorry to bother you. I thought you should know." "What's wrong?" I asked, feeling cold inside. "Jasmine didn't show up for work today," Susan said. "The supervisor called her, but her husband answered the phone. He said she was sick and couldn't come in for the next few days." "Is she sick?" I asked anxiously. "I don't know." Susan shook her head. "But yesterday, when we finished our shift, she looked fine. Tired, but not sick." She hesitated. "And what?" "And she said she and her husband had a serious talk tonight. Something about whether they should continue living together if they couldn't support each other through the hard times." I felt the ground go from under my feet. Are she and Parker breaking up? Because of financial problems? Because of my decision not to pay her tuition? "Thank you, Susan," I said. I'll figure it out." When she left, I sat back in my chair, feeling devastated. What had I done? In trying to teach Jasmine a lesson, had I ruined her life? Was the price too high? But then I remembered Carol's words. Sometimes the most loving thing to do is to let people face the consequences of their own actions. Jasmine made her choice when she married Parker, when she let him change her, when she started looking at me through his eyes. And now she was reaping the rewards of that choice. Painful, but perhaps necessary for her growth as a person. I picked up my phone, about to call her, but then put it back down. No, I wouldn't get involved. Not right now. Jasmine needs to figure out her own life, figure out for herself who really cares about her and who doesn't. All I could do was wait, and hope that eventually she would find her way. A way back to the values I was trying to instill in her. To the realization that a person's true worth is not in their status or their bank account, but in their actions and their principles. And maybe one day, the way back to me. Spring came late in Grand Forks this year. The snow held off until mid-April and then suddenly melted, turning the streets into an unkempt mess of puddles and mud. I watched this change from my front porch, sweeping my driveway of the remnants of winter and reflecting on how quickly nature can change, leaving the past behind. It had been almost 4 months since that Christmas dinner. 4 months since I made a decision that may have changed my relationship with my daughter forever. 4 months of uncertainty, infrequent news, and constant wondering if I had done the right thing. Jasmine didn't call or visit the entire time. At first I found out about her through third parties, from Susan, who worked with her at the post office, from Alan, whose wife sometimes saw her in town, from Carol, who seemed to know all the town news. But then the information came less frequently. Life went on. Mine, hers, alien and distant from each other. I knew that Jasmine was still working at the post office, working alongside her studies. I knew that her relationship with Parker had become strained. People had seen them fighting in the supermarket parking lot, noticed how she sometimes left work with tear-stained eyes. But there was no direct contact between us. Not until today. I was working in the garden, planting new raspberry bushes along the fence, when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. When I turned around, I saw an older used sedan parked in front of my house. Jasmine stepped out of the car. She looked different. Her hair was in a simple ponytail, no makeup, jeans and a t-shirt instead of her usual expensive clothes. But the main difference was not in her appearance, but in the way she held herself, without the former arrogance, with some new, unusual modesty. "Daddy," she came to the gate, hesitating to enter the yard. "Hi." "Jasmine." I straightened up, shaking the earth off my hands. "I didn't expect to see you." "I understand." She lowered her gaze. "I should have called first, but I was afraid you'd refuse to see me." "Come in." I opened the gate. "I was just about to take a break. Would you like some tea?" "I'd love to." She smiled weakly as she walked into the courtyard. Beautiful here. New plantings. Yes, I decided to expand the raspberry patch, I answered, leading her to the house. Last year's harvest was good, but I want more for jam. We entered the house, and I noticed Jasmine looking around as if she were seeing everything for the first time, or perhaps seeing it in a new way. Nothing's changed, she said quietly. Should it have? I asked, putting the kettle on. No, it's just, she hesitated. I'm glad it's still the way I remember it. We were silent while I made tea. Jasmine sat at the kitchen table, nervously rubbing the edge of the tablecloth. When I placed the cup in front of her, she looked at me gratefully. How are you doing, Daddy? Fine. I sat down across from her. I live as usual. Reading, working in the garden, seeing friends. And you? How's school? Finishing. She took a sip of tea. The diploma defense is in 2 weeks. Congratulations, I said sincerely. I always knew you could do it. Thanks to my job at the post office, she smiled weakly. Who would have thought I'd be working where Alan had once worked? It's a decent job, I said. Yes, she nodded. I realize that now. Though at first, she stopped, clearly embarrassed. You found it humiliating at first, I finished for her. Yes, Jasmine lowered her head. I was so arrogant, Daddy. So blind. We were silent again. Birds chirped outside the window, heralding spring. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, making patterns on the old wooden table. I came for a reason, Jasmine finally said. I wanted to apologize. A real apology, not like that time I just wanted you to pay for my semester. I'm listening, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Jasmine took a deep breath. I've been a terrible daughter, Dad. Selfish, ungrateful, snobbish. I let Parker and his notions of status and success change me. Let him convince me that your lifestyle, your job, your values are something to be ashamed of. She looked up and I saw tears in her eyes. But that's not true. You are the most honorable person I know. You worked hard all your life, raising me alone after my mom died, denying yourself everything so I could get an education. And I repaid you with contempt and shame. I'm unforgivable. Jasmine. I reached out and put my hand over hers. We all make mistakes. But not like this, she shook her head. Not like this. Not with someone who's always been on your side. She wiped away a tear. You know when I realized what I'd done? When I came home after our last conversation and Parker made a scene at me for going to work at the post office. He said his wife couldn't be a regular clerk, that it demeaned his status. And I suddenly saw myself through your eyes. Arrogant, snobbish, judging people for their work, for how they make a living. And what did you do? I asked quietly. I went to work anyway, she smiled weakly. Because there was no choice. I had to finish my studies. And you know what? I liked it. There are good people working there. Simple, honest, unpretentious, like you always said. I nodded, not trusting my voice. There was something warm in my chest, not triumph, not satisfaction that I'd been right, but rather a quiet joy that my daughter had found her way back, to the real me. What about Parker? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jasmine sighed. We broke up 2 months ago. He couldn't accept my new life, my job, that I was no longer ashamed of my origins. I'm sorry, I said, and it was the truth. Despite everything I thought about Parker, I didn't want my daughter to suffer. Neither did I, she smiled weakly. But it was for the best. I realized I'd never been myself around him, always playing a role, educated, sophisticated with the right views on life. It's exhausting, you know, constantly pretending to be someone else. I nodded understandingly. I know. The hardest job is not being yourself. Exactly, she looked at me with surprise. How did you? I tried it too, I admitted. After your mom died. Trying to be the perfect father, never showing weakness, always being strong and confident. It almost broke me. I didn't know, Jasmine said quietly. I didn't want you to know, I shrugged. I wanted to be your rock. You were. She squeezed my hand. You always have been. We sat in silence, finishing our tea. Outside the window, the spring wind moved the young leaves. Life went on, changed, renewed like nature after a long winter. And what now? I finally asked. What are your plans after graduation? I'm going to stay in Grand Forks, Jasmine answered, and I couldn't hide my surprise. Yeah, I know, I used to talk about moving to the big city. But now I feel like I can do more good here. In what way? I've been offered a job at the community center, she explained. As a social programs coordinator, I'll help people get an education, find jobs, solve legal problems. To use my knowledge of sociology in practice, not just in theory. That sounds wonderful, I said sincerely. You've always wanted to help people. Yes, she smiled. And I'll be close to you. I'll be able to come by more often. If you don't mind, of course. It's always good to see you, I said. You know that. Even after everything I said, tears came to her eyes again. After the way I acted, Jasmine, I looked at her seriously, you're my daughter. No matter what happens, no matter what you say, that will never change. I may be disappointed, upset, even angry, but I will always love you. She stood up, walked around the table, and hugged me. I felt her shoulders shake with silent sobs. I don't deserve a father like that, she whispered. Don't be silly. I stroked her back like I used to when she fell and smashed her knees as a child. We all make mistakes. We all lose our way sometimes. The important thing is that you found your way back. She pulled away, wiping away her tears. Thank you, Daddy, for everything, even for refusing to pay for my last semester. It was a hard decision, I admitted. I've had a lot of doubts about whether it was the right thing to do. You did absolutely the right thing, Jasmine said firmly. It was a lesson I had to learn, and I'm grateful that you were brave enough to teach it to me. We moved into the living room and the conversation flowed more freely. Jasmine talked about her work at the post office, about how at first she was afraid she couldn't cope, how she was embarrassed by her uniform, how she avoided acquaintances, and then how she gradually came to love the job, her colleagues, and the simplicity and honesty of their relationships. Susan has become a good friend of mine, Jasmine said. Can you imagine? Before, I wouldn't have even looked in her direction. I would have thought we were from different worlds. Now we often go out to lunch together, sometimes to the movies. I'm glad, I said. Susan is a good person. So is her Aunt Carol. Speaking of Carol, Jasmine smiled slyly. Are you and she still friends with her? I felt myself blush. Yes, we see each other. Sometimes we go to the movies, to cafes. Daddy, Jasmine rolled her eyes, but now the gesture didn't have the same disdain, just a kindly sneer. You're 68. You don't have to be embarrassed by the word relationship. I laughed, recognizing the echo of our Christmas conversation in her words. But it was different now. No venom, no condescension, just friendly teasing. Okay, we're in a relationship, I admitted. Carol and I are dating. Almost a year now. I'm happy for you, Jasmine said sincerely. She's a good person, and you deserve to be happy. So do you. I looked at her seriously. What about you? After Parker? Nothing serious yet, she shook her head. And frankly, I'm in no rush. I want to figure out what I really want out of life, without other people's influence. A wise decision, I approved. We talked until the evening, about her studies, about my garden, about the books we read, the movies we watched. A normal father-daughter conversation, no tension, no hidden resentments, no pretense. Just two people who love each other and are happy to be together. As it began to get dark, Jasmine got ready to leave. I have to go, she said. I have to get up early for work tomorrow, and then I have to finish the last chapter of my diploma." "Sure." I walked her to the door. "Are you, come by again?" "I will," she smiled. "Maybe on Sunday. If you're not busy, of course." "I'll be waiting." I hugged her goodbye. "Daddy," she lingered at the door, "I want you to know, I've never, not for a second, stopped loving you, even when I acted so horribly. It's just, I got lost for a while." "I know, sweetheart." I kissed her forehead like I used to do when she was little. "I never stopped loving you either." She got into her old sedan and drove away. I stood on the porch, looking after her, and felt the heaviness I had carried in my heart for those 4 months slowly dissolve. Back in the house, I sat in my chair and thought about what had happened, about the decision I had made that Christmas night, about the consequences it had for Jasmine, for me, for our relationship. It had been a difficult journey, for both of us, full of pain, doubt, loneliness. But looking at my daughter today, I saw that it was worth it. She's grown up, wiser, kinder, more sincere, found her true self under layers of pretense and snobbery. Sometimes tough decisions are necessary to teach important life lessons. Sometimes you have to have the courage to do what's right, even if it hurts, even if you risk losing something you care about. I remembered Carol's words. Sometimes the most loving thing to do is to let people face the consequences of their own actions. How right she was. My relationship with Jasmine and I would never be the same. Too much had happened, too much had been said. But perhaps they will be better, more honest, healthier, based on mutual respect and understanding, not financial dependence. We were starting over carefully, one step at a time. And there was something beautiful about this new beginning, like spring that had finally arrived after a long, cold winter. I went to the window and looked out at my garden, at the young shoots breaking through the ground, at the buds swelling on the trees, at the first flowers blooming in the beds. Everything is reborn. Everything is changing. Everything is growing, like my daughter, like myself. And so is our love for each other, which, through trials, has only grown stronger.